You know, I can remember when it was just a small little sleepy town and you could go everywhere, and it's grown by leaps and bounds around here.
It's an evolving city. It's an educated city. It's forced us to be better educated ourselves as journeymen in the construction industry.
And I think what's magical about now are all the different types of challenges and opportunities that we have, and that there's something there for everybody.
Seattle, along with Local 32, is a national treasure, and it's a map of how to.
The majestic Northwest, a region of the United States known for its abundant beauty, natural resources, and innovative opportunities. A draw since the mid-1800s for those who possess creativity, ambition, and grit. It was the call of lumber that first brought European settlers to the region in the 1850s. The plentiful rivers, lakes, and bays provided the timber industry with great resources to conduct its business. Soon the fishing trade, coal, and even the lure of gold expanded the potential of things to come. It was a hard-working, hard-playing town. It was the magic of everything Seattle. 1860s, the first water system is built. 1870s, the first bathtub with plumbing is installed. 1880s, the first water systems established. Unionism plants roots in topographers, dock workers, tailors, cigar makers, and more.
I think back in those days that the older folks that stood up and stood their ground and laid everything on the line had a true belief in unionism. I think that's carried over to Local 32. That's why we're one of the strongest building trades in the state.
If it wasn't for our earlier ancestors, we wouldn't have any of this. And they had to fight blood, sweat, and tears to get it.
Plumbers Local 32 was chartered by the UA in 1890, gaining solid footing with its first collective bargaining agreement in 1893, and just in time. In 1889, Seattle was devastated as the heart of Seattle's business district went up in flames. 29 blocks were leveled by the fire, and a city made mostly of wood buildings was left in ruins. In its wake was a massive building boom, with new building codes and requirements that proved a boon for the newly established UA Local.
Article 1. The master plumbers, when employing plumbers and gas fitters to work in the city of Seattle, agreed to employ none but members in good standing of the United Association.
As construction work grew, so did the shipbuilding industry, and in 1904, the UA chartered a second local, 473, to cover steam fitters, sprinkler fitters, and marine pipe fitters.
The Union Hall used to be here and the taverns were right across the street, so you'd have to run back and forth, or it was in the same building for a while. There'd been more than one shouting match and down and out and whatever.
The UA Brotherhood was growing and helping a young Seattle city make its mark on an entire region and nation. The Alaska-Yukon Pacific Exposition in 1909 served as a promotional event for Seattle and the North Pacific Rim. Nearly 4 million visitors came to the exposition. More publicity, more political pull. Seattle's influence as a progressive city was quickly gaining ground. The exposition was a testament to Seattle's innovative and bold culture, a culture that continued to set the tone for labor and Local 32. While labor and the progressives began demanding better government, Local 32 was also looking for new and bold ways to take on the open shop, with the creation of the Incorporated Shop, a shop created to employ out-of-work members and bring pressure to bear on the non-union. The new endeavor was a success, and 22 shops were organized in the process.
Well, I don't know how they were trained back then, but I would surmise when the journeyman told the helper or the apprentice and he walked 2 steps behind him on the right-hand side, that's where he walked.
Foreman would put you with a journeyman, say, okay, learn from him what you can. And he'd tell the journeyman, teach him everything you can.
Seattle's affinity for all things nautical skyrocketed during World War I. War demands soon had Seattle producing 20% of all warships, Shipyard workers took a pay freeze with a promise of a post-war raise. But when the war ended, the raise never came. Employers refused to negotiate, and 35,000 shipyard workers, along with thousands of union members, including the UA, took to the streets in solidarity, and a general strike ensued. For 5 days, Seattle was totally shut down. No business, no work. While the general strike was peaceful, the strikers were nevertheless painted as radicals. Public support withered, and the shipyard workers returned to their jobs without a raise. In its day, the strike was considered a failure, but as time went on, the general strike of 1919 came to symbolize a grit and determination that became a cultural cornerstone for the great city to build on.
The guys in 1919 are gone, but we still have retirees. And those retirees, they sacrificed a lot for what we have now. And when they were here, it was about, those guys that came before us, everything that they worked for, everything that they bled for, everything that they strove for, now it's our stewardship.
The city recovered, and in the 1920s and early 30s, engineers began to take advantage of the unique geography of the region. The rivers and the deep gorges that dominated the landscape became perfect environments to build hydroelectric dams, from the Gorge and Diablo dams to the Ross and Boundary dams. 32 members were hard at work, building some of the most well-known dams in the country. But all this prosperity soon came to a halt as the Great Depression hit, devastating Seattle just like the rest of America. Relief came to the UA in the form of New Deal public works projects. Local 32 members found work with the King County Extended Water Supply, the Lake Washington Floating Bridge, the Northwest Fisheries Science Center, various sewer improvement projects, and the Grand Coulee Dam. December 7, 1941. The attack on Pearl Harbor brought America into World War II and put thousands of UA and other building trades men and women to work. Boeing's B-17s and B-29s came out of Seattle's assembly plants by the thousands, and the city shipyards were overloaded with work building the naval fleet. Seattle's role in supporting the war effort led to a number 3 ranking in America's most important cities.
We were heavy into the yards in World War II. We built the local built a ton of ships here. This local had about 5,000 members working in the metal trades, building ships. Yeah, they were cranking them out.
After years of working side by side, Locals 32 and 473 agreed to merge in 1947. Now under the umbrella of Local 32, the new bigger local included plumbers and steam fitters. This new strength, leverage, and solidarity offered a greater presence for the UA in the Northwest and created a springboard for post-war success.
But back then, when they built high-rises, it took 40 plumbers on a high-rise.
And the first thing with my dad was light up the lead pots early in the morning when they were running waste and vents so they could pour all their joints. So that was the first thing they did in the morning.
The post-war era in Seattle reflected much of what was happening all across the U.S. Economic growth was soaring, and unionism was at an all-time high. Work was plentiful for members of Local 32. Powerhouses, dams, pipelines, commercial buildings, universities, and more kept members on the job.
That was the big push was World War II. And then, of course, the move into commercial jetliners and the 727, the 747, 707, 727, 757, now the 737.
We were kind of a one-horse town, and it was about Boeing's. Boeing's, everything that Boeing did had the big ripple effect, more houses, more apartments, more ancillary businesses that had more businesses come and more businesses.
Seattle was building a name for itself, and that momentum was just beginning. Innovative, creative, futuristic. Seattle captured the nation's imagination when it hosted the 1962 World's Fair with Boeing's Aerospace City. No surprise that Local 32 was at the center of it all, creating, building, bursting with Seattle pride.
That World's Fair shows a lot of the attitude that Seattle has.
It's cool to be able to take my kids up in the Space Needle and say, yeah, your great-grandpa worked on this, you know, and that's a pretty cool thing to say when you're driving around Seattle. Yeah, Grandpa worked on this.
That Space Needle, in the wintertime, it could be snowing up there at 500, and you drop down in the elevator to 300 feet, it'd be raining. There's a 8-inch waistline that goes up there that was Victaulic, that was suspended from the top. There's a 6-inch water line that went up there, and a 4-inch gas line. That the conditions to weld that gas line was very tough, windy, rainy.
I thought, man, that is tall. It was the tallest thing around here. You know, up until '53, the Smith Tower was the tallest building west of the Mississippi. And this dwarfed it.
Certainly the World's Fair industrially was a big turning point for Seattle for sure, as it did put Seattle on the map, and I think that changed the downtown makeup. And fortunately we had contractors and union members who were in place to be able to take advantage and build that.
The 1960s represented everything great about Seattle and Local 32, striving always to be progressive, innovative, and relevant, from the World's Fair to equal rights to apprenticeship training.